Hey, it's Captain Daryl Lyons. Hey, we're back again with another story. I was outside getting ready to plant the onions. It is February and time to put your onions in the ground. Made me think of a story. My grandfather, he always kept gardens. He had a garden up here at Toledo Bend. He had one down in Alvin. And we're not talking about little gardens. We're talking about quarter acre, sometimes even more. But just big, big gardens, and always knew what to plant, when to plant it. So, it's one of those things that we do. We plant the onions, get the tomatoes ready. Made me think of this story because we'd plant the gardens, he'd work in the gardens, and he predominantly fished at night. And everything he did was crappie or catfish. Didn't really bass fish much. But when he did, he would do that in the afternoons because he'd work the gardens first. That was priority one, is to work the garden, get the vegetables growing so that the gardens would be right. And they were absolutely beautiful gardens his whole life, my whole life actually, I should say. But all the neighbors would come over. You got times a year you plant onions, which is now, then your tomatoes, and your okra, your peas, things like that. So made me think of this story. It was we planted the garden, was headed out. It was in the fall, so we was in the fall garden, squash, that type of thing. And we was going night fishing that night out to one of the old brush piles that he had out with some bait sacks on it. And what we'd do was sink some willow trees around some standing timber. Here on Toledo, we had plenty of standing timber at the time. And that was where he had three different spots that he always kept baited up that we'd fish. So it was me and him, probably Dad, and may have been even Uncle Jerry. I don't remember. It was some adults in the boat. But we were all up, fall of the year, so it's kind of chilly at night. We had and you need to really know about the boat because the boat is key to what happened and what makes this such a great story. It's called Under Attack. So we're getting ready that evening and get the lanterns out, and he had 2 1/2 inch dowel rod poles that he had on the end of them fastened where he could hang the lanterns. You'd hang your lanterns and they'd stick out over the boat about 3 foot, and those would give you your light to draw in your fish. So you had Coleman lanterns. So he had a wash-a-tall walk-through windshield. It looks similar to a fishing ski nowadays, but back then that was what you had. You had the walk-through windshield type boats. Had the dual windows. Window would open in the middle so you could walk through. You had the seats in the front, which were like bench seats. And then in the back, you had the drivers, the passengers, and you had two behind it. So you had 4 seats total, had a 60 horse Evinrude. And tell you how old the boat was, it had a push button to put it in gear. Push the blue one would be forward, white was neutral, red was reverse. So that kind of gives you an idea what we're talking about. The seats were all mounted side by side. So we'd get out there and we're fishing that night. And about 2:30, it was time to come in. So Grandpa never navigated with a light. If he turned the light on, it's because he saw something he needed to identify, or he heard something that he couldn't see very well. So learn to navigate in the dark at night, and that's what we were doing. We were coming back in with the stars, wasn't running wide open or anything, just idling through and coming back in. So I'm a young kid at this time, probably around 7 or 10 years old, somewhere around in there, and I'm cold. It's chilly. I got my big jacket on. So with the lights being off, the lanterns are turned off. But if you've ever been around a Coleman gas lantern, you know it got hot. These things held heat, and there was like a little heater, personal heater, if you will. So I was laying in the floor by one of these lanterns as we were idling back in, and the adults were sitting up towards the front and they were talking. So you've got Grandpa's driving, and then whoever the others are right up there in the front, and they're all talking and idling and looking, and I'm back here in the back end by the motor, and we're idling through, coming through the creeks and the woods, and all of a sudden, like I said, I'm in the floor. He hits a stump. We're just a little bit outside the creek channel, bumps a stump. When he bumped that stump, at the time I didn't know what it was until later, but staying in the floor of the boat, half asleep, maybe full asleep at this point, but it didn't last long because something when he hit that stump, you'll hit a stump with a motor sometimes and it'll make the motor die. Well, it made the motor die, but then he just started right back up. Well, in the process of the motor dying and him restarting it, something come over the side of the boat, and I had no idea what it was. Landed on me, was flopping on me. I tried to jump up. It's like somebody slammed me back down to the ground because I caught one of the seats that I was partially up under, slammed me to the ground on top of what ended up being a bass, a nice little bass, a good solid keeper. But then I land on top of it, catch a fin. It's flopping around under me. I'm squalling like some wildcat's got a hold of me. The adults trying to get a light to find out what's going on. So they get me calmed down. They get the light on. They see the fish. And so it was just a funny thing. I wish we'd had video of it, and so glad we didn't really, because it'd be kind of embarrassing at this point. But it's one of those deals. It was just absolutely a catastrophe for me, and they just laughed. Up until my grandfather passed, he used to talk about when I was under attack in the back of the boat, when bass come out of the lake and attack you while you're in the boat. So we made good fun of that, and that was just one of those good times that we had. A story that'll always be there for me, and wanted to share that with y'all. We put the bass in the cooler, made our way on into the house. No harm, no foul, other than, well, me and getting beat up by a bass. But it was a great time, great memories. That's why you go out on the water. Hey, y'all get those kids out in the water. Remember, tugs that line, set the hook.